The smell hit first. Burned oil, cordite, and something worse. Something human. Joseph Kellerman stood in the dark garage bay, his single good eye useless in the blackout conditions. Around him, 70 Sherman tanks sat like corpses. Gutted, silent. Dead metal that was supposed to roll into German lines in 48 hours. It was February 1943, the Eastern Front, and the Americans had just gotten their asses handed to them. "Their scrap," Major Hastings said behind him, voice flat with exhaustion. "We don't have time, we don't have parts, and we sure as hell don't have mechanics who can work miracles." Kellerman ran his fingers along the nearest tank's engine housing. Cold steel. He could feel the fracture before he saw it. A hairline split in the mounting bracket that would have torn the whole assembly apart within 10 miles. "How many?" he asked. "What? How many do you need operational?" Hastings laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "All of them. Or we're sending infantry against panzers with rifles and prayers." Kellerman's head throbbed. The artillery blast 3 months ago had left him deaf in his left ear and half blind. Command had wanted to send him home, called him a liability. Instead, they'd buried him here, fixing trucks, greasing axles, invisible work for an invisible man. Now they needed him. "Give me 2 nights," Kellerman said quietly, "and turn off every light in this facility." "You're half blind, Kellerman. You want to work in the dark?" "I don't need to see." He pressed his palm flat against the tank's armored hull, felt the vibration of distant shelling through the metal. "I need to listen. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe now." By midnight, Kellerman had assembled a crew of 12. Mechanics too wounded, too old, or too exhausted for frontline duty. Men the Army had written off. "Here's how this works," he told them, voice low in the blackness. "No lights, no talk. You touch, you listen, you feel. Every bolt has a voice. Every gear tells you what's broken." "This is insane," someone muttered. "Probably." Kellerman moved to the first tank, sliding beneath it on his back. His fingers found the transmission almost immediately. Cracked housing, sheared teeth. He'd heard this exact failure 100 times before. The metal had a specific pitch when it was wrong. He called out part numbers from memory, locations, repair sequences, and then he moved to the next tank. By Oro 300, they'd finished 6. By dawn, 18. The crew worked in complete silence, guided only by Kellerman's voice in the darkness. Steady, precise, relentless. He didn't stop to eat, didn't stop to rest. His hands moved like a surgeon's, feeling for damage invisible to the eye, but something was wrong. Around tank 47, his fingers began to shake, not from cold, from pain. Sharp. Burning. Radiating up from his wrists into his shoulders like molten wire. He'd felt it before, months ago, before the doctors told him what it meant. Kellerman gritted his teeth and kept working, because if he stopped, 700 men would die in a field they'd never see coming. 20 hours in, Major Hastings returned. "How many?" he asked, disbelief thick in his voice. 63 operational, 7 more by morning. Hastings stared at him. That's not possible." Kellerman wiped oil from his good eye. "Then I guess we're witnessing a miracle, Major." But miracles have costs. And as Kellerman reached for the 64th tank, his right hand seized completely, fingers locking into a claw he couldn't open. He waited until Hastings left. Then he forced his hand open with his left, feeling tendons tear like old rope, because there were still 6 tanks left, and nobody could know what this was doing to him. The second night began with a lie. "Hands fine," Kellerman told his crew, flexing fingers that screamed with every movement. "Let's move." They didn't question him. Exhausted men don't question miracles. They just pray they hold. Tank 64, fuel pump failure, cracked cylinder head. Kellerman's hands moved through the darkness, reading the engine like Braille. But now every touch sent lightning up his arms. The nerves were dying. He knew that. Had known it for months. Progressive neuropathy, the doctors called it. Caused by the blast concussion. Irreversible nerve death starting in the extremities, crawling inward like frost. They'd given him 6 months before his hand stopped working entirely. That was 5 months ago. "Boss?" It was Martinez, one of the younger mechanics. "You're bleeding." Kellerman glanced down. His fingertips had split open from the constant friction against metal. Blood mixed with engine grease, black in the dim light from distant fires. "Keep working," he said. But Martinez had already seen something else. The way Kellerman's right hand tremored when he thought no one was looking. The way he had to use his left hand to position his right fingers into place. "Sir, if you need to, I need to finish these tanks." Kellerman's voice was steel. "That's what I need." He moved to 65. Around them, the war continued. Artillery boomed in the distance. German 88s, distinctive and terrible. The ground shook. Dust rained from the garage ceiling. Through the open bay doors, Kellerman could see tracer fire arcing across the night sky like deadly fireworks. The offensive was supposed to launch at dawn, 16 hours. His crew worked in synchronized silence now, trusting Kellerman's instructions even when they seemed impossible. Replace that valve without seeing it. Torque that bolt by feel alone. Listen for the click that meant alignment was perfect. They'd become extensions of him, his eyes, his strength. Because his own body was failing. Tank 68 brought a new problem. Sabotage. Kellerman's fingers found it immediately. Sand packed deliberately into the oil intake. Someone had wanted this tank to fail, wanted the entire column to fail. "Martinez," he called quietly. "Check the others, all of them. Look for contamination." They found it in 4 more tanks. Precise, professional, not battlefield damage, intentional destruction. "Who the hell would," Martinez started. "Doesn't matter right now." But it did matter. It meant someone in this camp wanted the offensive to fail, wanted Americans to die. Just fix them. Quietly. Because if Hastings found out there was a saboteur, he'd lock down the entire facility, launch investigations, delay the offensive, and 700 men would still die. So Kellerman said nothing, he just worked faster. By 0200, his right hand had stopped responding entirely. He could see it moving, could will his fingers to close, but felt nothing, just dead weight hanging from his wrist. He switched to his left hand only, working twice as hard, twice as slow. Tank 70, the last one. Kellerman slid beneath it, and immediately knew this was different. The damage wasn't mechanical. The entire electrical system had been gutted, wires cut, fuses pulled, distributor cap shattered. This wasn't combat damage. This was a message. And there, scratched into the tank's undercarriage in crude letters he could barely make out. "Let them die." Kellerman's blood went cold. Someone didn't just want the offensive to fail. They wanted everyone to fail. This was treason on a level that made his stomach turn. "Boss?" Martinez was suddenly beside him, voice tight. "We've got a problem." "I know. I found—" "Not that." Martinez pointed toward the garage entrance. "Major Hastings is coming back. With MPs." Kellerman pulled himself out from under the tank. In the distance, he could see flashlights cutting through the darkness. Voices, official, angry. "They know about the sabotage?" he asked. "Worse." Martinez's face was pale. "Someone told them you're unfit for duty, that you're hiding a medical condition, they're here to relieve you." Kellerman's world tilted. If they pulled him now, if they discovered the nerve damage, the last tank wouldn't be finished. The offensive would launch incomplete. Men would die, and whoever sabotaged these tanks would get exactly what they wanted. "How long do I have?" Kellerman asked. 5 minutes, maybe less. Kellerman looked at Tank 70, at the gutted electrical system that would take hours to repair properly, at his crew of broken men who'd followed him through 2 nights of impossible work, at his own hands, one dead, one dying. "Get me every electrical component we have," he said quietly. "Every wire, every fuse, every connection." "Boss?" There's no time to... I'm not asking. Kellerman's voice cut like broken glass. I'm going to do something incredibly stupid, and when the MPs get here, you're all going to tell them I worked alone. Understand? Martinez stared at him. What are you... But Kellerman was already moving. Because there was one way to fix a completely destroyed electrical system in 5 minutes. You didn't repair it. You became it. He grabbed the main power cable in his left hand, the only hand still capable of feeling, and pressed it against the tank's chassis. Felt the voltage potential humming through the metal. Joseph, don't... Martinez lunged forward. Too late. Kellerman completed the circuit with his own body, using himself as a living conduit to test every connection, every pathway. The electricity slammed through him, not enough to kill, but enough to make every nerve ending he had left scream in unison. But it worked. In the darkness, he could feel exactly where the current flowed, where it stopped, where connections were broken. He became the circuit breaker, the diagnostic tool, the missing piece. His crew watched in horror as he rewired the entire system using his body as the testing mechanism, touching cables, completing paths, verifying voltage with nothing but burning flesh and desperate knowledge. The flashlights were getting closer. Kellerman, Hastings's voice boomed across the garage. Step away from that tank. But Kellerman had 3 more connections. 2 more. 1. The tank's engine turned over, coughed, then roared to life. 70 tanks, all operational. Kellerman collapsed. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was Martinez screaming for a medic, and the sound of MPs shouting orders he could no longer understand. And the quiet, terrible certainty that whoever had sabotaged these tanks was still out there, still watching, still waiting, because Kellerman had just destroyed the only evidence that could prove what they'd done. Rewiring the electrical system erased the sabotage completely. He'd saved 700 men, but he'd let a traitor escape. Kellerman woke to white light and the smell of antiseptic. Field hospital, canvas walls, the sound of men dying quietly in cots around him. His hands were wrapped in bandages thick as boxing gloves. He couldn't feel them at all anymore. You're awake. Major Hastings stood at the foot of his bed, face unreadable. The doctors say you've got 3rd-degree burns on both palms, severe nerve damage. They want to send you stateside for medical discharge. Kellerman's throat was sandpaper. The tanks, all 70 rolled out at dawn. The offensive was a complete success. Hastings paused. You saved a lot of lives, Kellerman. Then why do you look like someone died? Hastings pulled up a chair. Sat. For a long moment, he just stared at his hands. Because I need to know why you destroyed the evidence, he said finally. Kellerman's blood froze. Don't. Hastings's voice was quiet, cold. Martinez told me everything. The sabotage, the contaminated tanks, the message scratched into number 70. He leaned forward. You rewired that entire electrical system, erased every trace of tampering, and I need to know why. The canvas walls seemed to close in. I didn't have time, Kellerman said. The MPs were coming. If I'd stopped to preserve evidence... Bullshit. Hastings cut him off. You had choices. You could have photographed it, documented it, called for backup. His eyes were hard. Instead, you made sure nobody could prove a goddamn thing. So I'm asking you one more time. Why? Kellerman looked at the ceiling, at the bloodstains on the canvas from the casualties around him, at the future that was slipping away with every word. Because I knew him, he said finally. The silence was deafening. You knew him, Hastings repeated. The saboteur. I know who it had to be. Only 3 people had unsupervised access to those tanks during the blackout period. One of them was killed in the initial attack. One was with me the entire time. Kellerman's voice was barely a whisper. The 3rd was my brother. Hastings didn't move, didn't blink. David Kellerman, Joseph continued. Supply sergeant, handles parts distribution. He's the only one who could have contaminated those tanks without raising suspicion. The only one who knew exactly which systems to sabotage for maximum damage. Where is he now? Transferred out yesterday morning. Orders came through before dawn. He's on a supply convoy to the rear echelon. Kellerman closed his eyes. He's gone. And you let him go. Hastings stood. You destroyed evidence to protect your own brother, a traitor who tried to kill 700 American soldiers. No. Kellerman's voice was steel. I destroyed evidence because I couldn't prove it. Because without that electrical system intact, all I had was suspicion and family relation. Because if I'd accused him without evidence, it would have torn this unit apart with investigations and witch hunts while we're trying to win a goddamn war. So you made the choice yourself, judge, jury, and executioner, except you let him walk. I let the mission succeed. Kellerman's good eye locked on Hastings. That's what you wanted, isn't it? 70 tanks, operational. 700 men, still breathing. The offensive, victorious. He paused. Or would you rather have had the evidence? Hastings' jaw worked. You don't get to make that call. I already did. The major turned toward the tent flap, then stopped. The doctors say you'll never have full use of your hands again. The nerve damage is permanent. Progressive. He looked back. Did you know that before you electrocuted yourself? Kellerman said nothing. You knew. Hastings' voice was barely audible. You knew you were destroying your last chance at a normal life, at ever working with your hands again. He shook his head slowly. For what? To protect a traitor? To protect the mission, Kellerman said quietly, and to make sure David knew I knew. What? The last thing I did before I completed that circuit, I scratched something into the tank's chassis, right next to his message. Kellerman's voice was cold as winter. Just 3 words. I know, David. Hastings stared at him. So he knows, Kellerman continued. Knows that I found him. Knows that I could expose him any time. Knows that his own brother is watching. He paused. Fear is a longer prison than any court-martial could provide. That's not justice. No. Kellerman looked at his bandaged hands. At the future they represented. It's something colder than that. Hastings left without another word. Kellerman lay in the darkness listening to the wounded breathe around him. He thought about David, his younger brother, the kid who'd followed him into the army because Joseph had made it sound like an adventure, the boy who'd written home about American ideals and fighting tyranny. When had it changed? He remembered now, fragments, puzzle pieces clicking into terrible place. David's letters had grown bitter after Kasserine Pass, after watching American tanks burn against German 88s, after seeing friends die in machines that broke down before they could even reach the fight. We're sending boys to die in broken equipment, David had written, and nobody cares. Nobody stops it. Joseph had thought it was just combat fatigue, disillusionment, the normal corrosion of war on idealism. He hadn't seen it for what it was, a man concluding that if the army wouldn't stop the dying, maybe he would, by making sure the tanks never left the garage at all. It was insane logic, twisted mercy, the kind of thing that made perfect sense inside a mind that had watched too much death and broken under the weight of it. And Joseph had let him escape. Not to protect David, not really. To protect himself from having to watch his own brother hang for treason. That was the truth he couldn't say to Hastings, couldn't admit even in the darkness of this hospital tent. He'd chosen mission success, chosen to be the hero who saved 700 lives. But he'd also chosen to be the brother who looked the other way. 3 days later, Martinez visited. Boss, he looked uncomfortable in the civilian clothes he'd been issued. Medical discharge papers had come through for half the crew. There's something you need to know. David? Kellerman asked. Martinez nodded slowly. Supply convoy he was on got hit 2 days ago. German raiders, everyone. He trailed off. Dead? Missing. Convoy disappeared completely. No bodies, no wreckage. Like it just vanished. Kellerman felt something cold settle into his chest. That's not possible, he said. Even if they were overrun, there'd be something. Burned vehicles, scattered supplies. That's what the MPs said. Martinez pulled a folded paper from his pocket, handed it over. But then they found this, at the last known position of the convoy. Kellerman unfolded it with bandaged hands that could barely grip. It was a supply requisition form, standard Army issue. With a message written across the back in handwriting he recognized instantly. "You were wrong, Joseph. I wasn't working alone." The paper fell from his fingers. "There's more," Martinez said quietly. "3 other tank battalions have reported sabotage in the last week. Same pattern, same methods, all traced back to supply networks." He paused. Whatever David was part of, it's bigger than one angry sergeant. Kellerman's mind raced. The sabotage, the message, the convoy disappearing without a trace. David hadn't been a lone saboteur acting out of twisted mercy. He'd been part of something organized, something with resources, something that could make an entire convoy vanish like smoke. "How many tanks?" Kellerman asked. "What?" "In those other battalions. How many tanks were sabotaged?" Martinez checked his notes. 47 total, across 3 units. "And casualties?" 218 dead when the tanks failed in combat, another 400 wounded, 400 men. Because Joseph had chosen to protect evidence instead of exposing a network, because he'd thought he was being clever, thought fear would be enough, because he'd prioritized his own guilt over the mission he claimed to care about. "I need to speak with Hastings," Kellerman said. "Now." "Boss, you're not cleared for..." "Now." Martinez ran. Hastings arrived within the hour, face grim. "You've heard," Kellerman said, "about your brother." "Yes." The major pulled up a chair. "And about the network. Military intelligence is already investigating. They're looking in the wrong place." "Excuse me?" Kellerman struggled to sit up, bandaged hands useless. David wasn't political. He wasn't an ideologue. He was broken, traumatized, looking for a way to stop the death. He paused. Someone found him in that state. Someone recruited him. Someone who knew exactly how to weaponize his trauma. "We're aware." "You're not." Kellerman's voice was urgent. "Because I know how David thinks. Knew him." He corrected himself. The convoy route he was on, it passed through 3 supply depots, all of them feeding tank battalions. So whoever took him knows what he knows. Every vulnerability in those supply chains, every choke point, every place where sabotage would be most effective. Kellerman locked eyes with Hastings. "You need to lock down every supply depot between here and Berlin. Immediately." "That's hundreds of locations." "Then you'd better start moving." Kellerman's voice was cold. "Because David had access to distribution records for 6 months. He knows which units are about to receive equipment, which convoys carry critical parts, which mechanics can be turned or eliminated. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. He was making a map," Hastings said slowly, "of our entire supply network. And now someone else has it." Hastings stood, started for the tent flap, stopped. "This is your fault," he said without turning around. "You could have stopped this when you had the chance." "I know. 400 men are dead because you chose to protect your brother instead of the mission." "I know." Kellerman's voice cracked. "I know what I did. I know what it cost. And I know I have to live with that." "No." Hastings turned. His face was granite. "You don't get to just live with it." He dropped a folder on the bed. "You're going to fix it." Kellerman stared at the folder. "What is this?" "Transfer orders. You're being reassigned to special operations. Mission, hunt down and eliminate the sabotage network." Hastings' smile was sharp as a knife. "You wanted to protect your brother? Fine. Now you get to find everyone he was working with. And you get to watch them hang. Every single one. I can barely use my hands. Then you'll learn to work without them. You've got 3 weeks of physical therapy and training. Then you deploy." Hastings leaned close. "You made this mess, Kellerman. Now you're going to clean it up." or die trying. He walked out. Kellerman sat in the darkness, staring at the folder he couldn't open, at the future it represented, at the terrible certainty that saving those 70 tanks had been the easy part, because now he had to hunt the ghosts of his own mistakes. And somewhere out there, his brother was watching, waiting, knowing that Joseph would come, knowing exactly how to break him. 3 weeks passed like bleeding through gauze. Physical therapy was torture, learning to hold a weapon with hands that no longer obeyed, learning to fight with nerve endings that screamed or stayed silent in equal measure, learning to live inside a body that was slowly turning to stone from the inside out. The therapists were efficient, cold. They didn't care that Kellerman had saved 700 men. They only cared that he could pull a trigger. By week 2, he could. By week 3, he could do it in the dark. "You're ready," Hastings said, watching Kellerman field strip a pistol with bandaged fingers that moved like broken machinery. "Your team leaves at dawn." "Team? You didn't think we'd send you alone, did you?" Hastings gestured toward the door. 3 men entered. Kellerman recognized 2 of them immediately. Martinez, still limping from shrapnel wounds but moving with purpose. And behind him, someone Kellerman had hoped never to see again. David Kellerman walked into the room like a ghost made flesh. Joseph's world tilted. "Surprised?" David's voice was exactly the same cadence, same slight rasp from childhood pneumonia, same brother. "You should be." "You're dead," Joseph whispered. The convoy was a cover. David sat down across from him. No restraints, no guards, like they were having coffee instead of confronting treason. Or rather, an extraction. "I needed to disappear, needed you to think I was gone." "Why?" "Because you were getting too close." David leaned back. "That message I left you, about not working alone? That was true, but here's what you didn't figure out, big brother. I wasn't working for them. I was working against them." The room went silent. "Explain," Hastings said quietly. David pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag before speaking. 6 months ago, I started noticing patterns. Supply shipments that didn't match requisition forms. Parts that were ordered but never arrived. Mechanics who died in accidents that weren't actually accidental. He exhaled smoke. Someone was running a sabotage network inside our own supply chain. Someone with access to everything. "So you became a saboteur yourself?" Joseph's voice was hoarse. "I became bait." David's eyes were hard. "I started copying their methods, making my sabotage obvious enough to get their attention but subtle enough to look amateur. I wanted them to recruit me, to bring me inside." "And did they?" "Eventually." David stubbed out his cigarette. "Took 3 months. But finally someone approached me, told me there were others who felt the same way, who thought the army was sending boys to die in broken equipment, who wanted to stop the slaughter. By causing more slaughter, Martinez said. That's what I thought too at first." David looked at his hands. "But then I saw the truth. These weren't ideologues or traitors. They were something worse." "What could be worse?" Hastings asked. "Profiteers." The word hung in the air like a disease. "The sabotage wasn't about stopping the war," David continued. "It was about extending it. Every tank that broke down meant replacement parts ordered. Every casualty meant new equipment requisitioned. Every failure meant more contracts, more manufacturing, more money flowing to the companies that supplied the military." Joseph felt sick. "You're saying someone is sabotaging our own equipment for profit?" "Not someone." David pulled out a folder, opened it. Inside were photographs, shipping manifests, financial records. An entire network, suppliers who deliver faulty parts, quartermasters who approve substandard equipment, inspectors who look the other way, all of them getting kickbacks from manufacturers who profit from failure. "That's impossible," Hastings said. "The oversight alone is run by the same people taking the kickbacks." David's smile was bitter. "It's beautiful, really. Self-regulating corruption. Every level protects the level above it because everyone's guilty. Then why the sabotage? Joseph asked. If they're already profiting from faulty equipment, why risk active sabotage? Because the war was ending too quickly. David lit another cigarette. After Stalingrad, after El Alamein, the writing was on the wall. Germany was losing, which meant American manufacturing would slow down. Contracts would dry up. The money would stop. So they extended the war, Martinez said slowly, by making sure we couldn't win battles as fast, by keeping equipment barely functional, by ensuring every victory was costly enough to require massive resupply. Exactly, David pointed at Joseph. Those 70 tanks you repaired? They weren't supposed to work. That offensive was supposed to fail, because failure meant 6 more months of war, 6 more months of contracts, 6 more months of profit. Joseph remembered the message scratched into Tank 70, the deliberate, personal cruelty of it. But that was your handwriting, he said. Your sabotage. My cover. David's voice was cold. I needed them to think I was all in, committed. So I sabotaged those tanks knowing you'd fix them, knowing you'd find the message, knowing you'd make the choice you made. You used me. I trusted you. David leaned forward. I knew you'd prioritize the mission over exposing me. Knew you'd fix the tanks no matter what it cost you personally. Knew you'd destroy the evidence to save 700 lives instead of prosecuting one suspect. So all of this, the sabotage, the message, the convoy disappearing, was planned? Not the convoy. David's face darkened. That was them cleaning house. They figured out I was investigating, decided I was a liability. The convoy ambush was supposed to kill me and eliminate the evidence I'd gathered. But you survived. Military intelligence extracted me. David gestured at Hastings. They'd been running parallel investigation. When I signaled that my cover was blown, they pulled me out, staged my death, gave me 3 weeks to compile everything I had. He pushed the folder toward Joseph. This is all of it. Names, dates, transactions. Enough to dismantle the entire network. Enough to prosecute everyone from supply sergeants to generals. He paused. But we have a problem. What problem? The network knows we're coming. They know military intelligence is investigating. So they're accelerating. David pulled out a map. In 48 hours, 3 major offensives are launching along the Western Front. Patton's 3rd Army, Montgomery's 21st Army Group, and Eisenhower's main thrust toward Germany. That's 15,000 vehicles, Hastings said. Maybe more. All of them supplied through depots controlled by the network. David's finger traced supply routes. They've spent 6 months positioning themselves. They control every choke point, every distribution center, every inspection station. They're going to sabotage the entire offensive, Joseph said. Worse. David looked up. They're going to let it launch. Let those 15,000 vehicles roll out. Let those 100,000 men commit to battle. He paused. And then everything will break all at once in the middle of combat. The implications were staggering. Casualty estimates? Hastings asked. Tens of thousands, maybe more. David's voice was flat. It'll be the worst American military disaster since Pearl Harbor, and it'll extend the war by a year, maybe 2. Which means more contracts, Martinez said. More profit, billions of dollars. David stubbed out his cigarette. Blood money on a scale nobody's ever conceived of. Joseph stared at the folder, at the web of corruption it represented, at the lives hanging in the balance. Why me? He asked finally. Why bring me into this? Because you're the only one who can stop it, David said. Those 70 tanks taught me something. You don't just fix machines, you understand them. You can feel what's wrong. Diagnose problems nobody else sees. I can barely use my hands. You don't need your hands. David's eyes were intense. You need what's in your head, 20 years of mechanical knowledge. The ability to identify sabotage by touch and sound, the capacity to work under impossible conditions. He paused. In 48 hours, we need to inspect every critical vehicle in those offensives. Identify which ones have been sabotaged. Fix what we can and quarantine what we can't. That's thousands of vehicles, hundreds of different systems. Which is why you're leading a team. Hastings pulled out another map. We've assembled 200 mechanics, best in the Army. They'll work under your direction following your protocols. In 48 hours? In 36? Hastings checked his watch. We lost 12 hours arguing about whether to bring you in on this. Joseph looked at his bandaged hands, at the nerve damage that would never heal, at the future that had narrowed to a single terrible point. And if we fail? Then 100,000 men die, David said quietly. And the people responsible will profit from every death, every injury, every broken vehicle that needs replacing. But no pressure, right? Martinez tried to smile. It didn't work. Joseph stood. His legs were unsteady from weeks in bed, but he forced them to hold. I need a map of every supply depot between here and the Rhine. I need maintenance records for every vehicle in those 3 offensives. I need a list of every mechanic who's had access to those vehicles in the last month. Already prepared. Hastings handed over a briefcase. And I need my crew. Martinez, find everyone who worked those 70 tanks. Get them here. Now. Some of them are stateside. Medical discharge. Then get them back. Tell them what's at stake. Joseph's voice was steel. Tell them it's the same job as before, just bigger. He turned to David. The people running this network, where are they now? Still embedded. Still working. We haven't arrested anyone because we can't afford to spook them. If they know we're coming, they'll accelerate the sabotage, make it impossible to detect, so they think they've won. They think they're about to win. David's smile was sharp. Which gives us one advantage. What's that? They're arrogant. They think we can't possibly inspect thousands of vehicles in time. Think our mechanics are too slow, too stupid, too limited by regulations and procedures. David paused. They don't know about you. Joseph looked at the maps, the records, the impossible task ahead. They're right to be arrogant, he said quietly. What we're attempting is impossible. You repaired 70 tanks in 2 nights, Hastings said. That nearly killed me. And this might finish the job. Hastings didn't flinch. But you're going to do it anyway because you're the only one who can. Joseph wanted to argue, wanted to say there had to be another way, wanted to collapse back into bed and let someone else carry this burden. But he remembered the sound of those 70 tanks starting up, the knowledge that 700 men were alive because of what he'd done, and now 100,000 more hung in the balance. I'll need complete authority, he said. No command structure, no chain of approval. If I say a vehicle is compromised, it gets pulled immediately. Done. And I want immunity for my crew. Whatever they do, whatever rules they break, no consequences. You're asking for a lot. I'm asking for what it takes to win. Joseph's good eye locked on Hastings. Because if we fail, you won't have an army left to discipline. Hastings considered, then nodded. You have 24 hours to get to the forward depots, another 12 to complete inspections. He paused. After that, the offensives launch whether you're done or not. Then we'd better not waste time. Joseph picked up the briefcase, started for the door, stopped. David, he said without turning around. That message you left me. I know, David. When did you find it? 10 minutes after you scratched it. David's voice was quiet. I came back, watched you work, saw what you sacrificed to finish those tanks. He paused. That's when I knew you'd be perfect for this, because you'll sacrifice anything, even yourself, for the mission. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's supposed to be the truth. Joseph walked out into the cold morning air. Behind him, he heard Martinez and David gathering equipment, heard Hastings making phone calls, mobilizing resources, setting in motion a plan that would either save 100,000 lives or fail so spectacularly that no one would survive to assign blame. And Joseph thought about the choice he'd made 3 weeks ago, protecting evidence instead of exposing corruption, choosing mission success over justice. It had been the wrong choice, he knew that now. But maybe he could make it right. Not through redemption, There was no redemption for the 400 men who died because of his silence, but through action, through doing what nobody else could do, through using the skills that were killing him to save lives he'd never meet. His hands throbbed. The nerve damage was spreading. In 6 months, maybe less, he'd lose all function completely. But he didn't need 6 months. He only needed 36 hours. After that, it wouldn't matter what happened to Joseph Kellerman, because 100,000 men would be alive to tell the story. Or they'd all be dead and the truth would die with them. If this story marked you, subscribe and continue with us. There are still many hidden truths that the world needs to know.